In this webinar, we are going to focus on the GMAT algorithm. How does it work? Like how does the whole adaptive algorithm really work? We're going to dissect the algorithm. We're going to take up various case studies to go about understanding how it works and how you should modify your preparation. Okay. But before I get started, I would quickly run you through a short introduction about me as an individual. Okay. What is that I do? So I am Piyush and I'm going to be your main host today. I'm going to be the only person in this webinar. I'm going to help you with your questions as well. I'm going to run you through the whole webinar. And I have 8 years of experience of mentoring students get into top P schools across the globe. I have taken the GMAT myself. I have scored a 740 and I love analyzing data. And that is something you will get to see even during this webinar. So I love analyzing data. I love understanding how things work and sharing the same with students to help them improve their scores. So that's about me. In this webinar, there are going to be 3 sections. In the first part of the webinar, we are very quickly going to talk about who we are. Okay, who we are, like what do we do exactly, and then we are going to move to the second part of this webinar, which is going to be running for approximately 70 to 80 minutes, where I'm going to focus solely on the adaptive algorithm part. And then I'm going to open this session for 15-minute Q&A, open-ended Q&A, where you can ask any sort of questions, whether it is related to GMAT or your MBA applications or anything else that you want to talk about with respect to your MBA applications. Okay, so that is how the whole webinar is structured. So without any further ado, let me get into the first section. So who are we? So we are a team of experts who have been in this test prep industry for more than 30 years now. So we have a combined experience of 30 years on our team, and we have worked with some of the top institutes across the globe. And when we were working with these institutes, we had a first-hand experience of interacting with many students. And while interacting with the students, we identified that there are certain pain points that exist with every student, basically. What we saw was that students are generally left to plan their studies themselves. Okay, GMAT as a test is a very dense test. It tests you on so many different things, and it's a very complex test. And as a working professional, it becomes very difficult for you to think about how should you go about planning your studies yourself. And then you have to also analyze your strengths and weaknesses to make sure that you're always on track and you're headed in the right direction. And there is a very little individual attention available in the industry. And what we found was the existing solutions in the industry were trying to solve the problem, but only partially. So even if the solutions that provide you with a study plan only give you a standardized, static 1 month or 3 month plan, which is not really personalized for you, you have to rather stick to that plan to make sure that you're able to adjust to it. These plans do not adapt as you learn. So let's say you have 1 week of holiday coming up, you want to put in extra effort, the plan will not adjust. Let's say there's hard time at office, you're not able to prepare for some weeks, the plan is not going to adapt at all. So all of that actually leads to people working on the preparation inconsistently, and that leads to a lot of problems later on. The people who even share stats, there are some courses who share a lot of statistics around your scores. They will tell you that in SC your accuracy is 60% or 70%, but they don't really tell you why your accuracy is low. So the insights are not really actionable, and the only way to get individual attention is through private tutoring. And we all know private tutoring is not really affordable for everyone. And that is when we realize that all these problems can be very, very easily solved using technology. And in the modern age, no one should actually study from a static course. And that's when the idea of GMATWiz came up, where we thought that we will actually create world's first and only truly personalized course. And that's what we have done at GMATWiz. Okay, so Anushka, you will get a recording of this webinar. Don't worry about that. So I'm going to quickly talk about how we are different from other people out there. So when you work with GMATWiz, you get a personalized study plan, and this plan is basically personalized to your needs, your requirements, your time availability, and it adapts every single week. And not just that, the plan is integrated with the entire course materials, so you don't just know what to do when, you only have to click on a button which says start. and you get started with the activities, the lessons, the questions right then and there inside the plan itself. So it's a completely integrated experience that we will provide. And not just that, the course also comes with a real-time improvement module. So basically, you will see that if you are not doing well, the AI will automatically identify how and what you should do in order to improve your performance. And it will constantly change your course in real time if needed. So if it identifies that there are some issues in your understanding, it will go back to the database, identify what are the lessons which are related to that, what are the questions which are related to that, and serve you improvement modules right then and there. We are the only platform in the world which has the capability of doing this. And we believe that AI can do a lot, but still human touch is required. So anyone who takes up a complete package like the GMAT prep package or private tutoring packages get dedicated mentors. So even if you are taking an online course, you have a dedicated mentor. And when we say a dedicated mentor, basically we are talking about someone who is going to look at your progress every 10 to 15 days. You can speak to them, and people who are assigned as mentors are not like standard call center executives who are just reading from a document which is standardized for them. The mentors that we provide are people with 8+ years of experience, have written the GMAT themselves, and have scored 700 plus themselves. So they know the grind, they know how it works. So this is something we provide, and we feel that these three things are the key reason why we are one of the most effective courses on GMAT Club. So if you go by average score improvement, we are proud to say this, that GMAT Wiz stands at a diverse 116 points average score improvement, whereas even the topmost brands that you can see on your screen are way behind us. And that's one of the biggest reasons why we are so successful. Okay, so this was very quickly about what GMAT Wiz does, and let me now quickly move to the second part of the webinar, which is the main part. So what are we going to cover in this webinar today? I'm going to quickly run you through the main part. How are we going to discuss about the adaptive algorithm? So first of all, we'll start with a simple case in point to basically put you up to pace to help you understand how the algorithm really works. And then we will move to actually seeing a use case. Basically from that case in point, we'll try to understand how the adaptive algorithm works in terms of difficulty levels and all. And then we will understand how can you be prepared, how should you modify your prep strategy to nail this adaptive test. Okay, so we'll talk about prep strategy from there. Then we will move to test taking strategy. Now once you have understood the prep strategy, what is also very important is, if let's say you are going to write the test, you need to understand what is the right test taking strategy for quant and verbal. If you have the right testing strategy, you can see a bump of up to 30 points in your score just by using the right strategy with the right prep strategy. Okay, and then in the end, we are going to talk about a hot topic these days, which is the interim online GMAT. Okay, we are going to talk about that very quickly as well. So this is the overall agenda of the second part of the webinar. So let me get started with the case in point. Okay, so let me share this with you. So what happened, this is the case of a student who actually took the GMAT. He was reaching the end of the verbal section. Okay, and what he found was that there were 14 questions left on this or still to be attempted in verbal. So basically he completed 22 of them. He was still left with 14 questions, and the time left on the clock was just 19 minutes. And to his surprise, he served the RC passage, which is very weird. He spent what, 10-15 seconds or maybe 20 seconds reading it. The passage was really weird. It was on some historical American history around nurses and doctors and all of it. Very weird passage, a very convoluted passage. The language was not really easy to understand, and he was faced with a dilemma, like what should I go and do forward? Like, I have a very tough passage in front of me, probably I'm not able to understand it. He spent some 20 seconds and he has hardly any time left. How many of you know what is the average time, like what is the average time that you get on the GMAT verbal section? I would like to know from you guys in the chat here. What is the average time? Do you know that? Average time for every verbal question that you get on GMAT. You can type in the chat, basically. Let me see how many of you know that already. Okay, good response, Nishchal. So 1.8 minutes. I think you meant that, Nishant. Okay, 1 minute 45 seconds. Good. I mean, it's not 2 minutes, it's slightly less than that. 1.8 minutes is what you generally get. Good. Now, if you look at this student's data, he was just having what do I say? It's about 19 by 14 minutes. Okay, so which is much lesser than like 1.5 minutes as well. Okay, so what should the student do in this case? If you were in that situation, what will you do? I'm going to share 3 use cases with you, and I'm going to ask you a very simple poll, like what will you do if you were in this situation instead of that student? So the first thing, like first option with him was he can skip some of the questions or do them half-heartedly so that he can actually save time for the last questions. Okay, that was one option that was available with him. The second option with the student was that he can possibly do this RC really well and be selective with the last 10 questions. So instead of like worrying about like the last 10 questions, he first does this RC really well, gives his 100% on it, and then he solves the last 10 questions selectively. Okay, the third option was he can simply skip this passage. He completely skips this passage and focuses on getting the last 10 questions right. Okay, because it is important to complete the test as well. Now tell me, take your time if you want to, tell me what will you do in this situation? Try to place yourself in this situation that you have 14 questions and 19 minutes left. How will you go about approaching this problem yourself? Okay, I would like to hear from you guys. Okay, I'll wait for a few more responses. I still see some responses coming up. So I'll wait for a few more responses. Let's see what everyone is gonna do. Okay, so what will you do? Will you skip some of the questions, or will you actually solve the RC well and then move next ones, selective in the last 10 questions, or will you skip the passage completely? What is that you're gonna do? Okay, so I see a good number of responses from people already, and let me end the poll now. All right, so if you can see, 60% of the batch that we have over here has selected that they will be basically skipping the entire passage and they will try to focus on the last 10 questions. 35%, which is 1/3 of the batch roughly, has gone in favor of attempting this passage really well. Okay, and only 8% of you mentioned that I should skip some of the questions or do them half-heartedly. Now let me tell you, this was the exact same thing that happened with me. Okay, this was my scenario. I was faced with this trouble in the real test. I was telling myself as a student, but this was exactly my scenario. I spent 20-30 seconds on that passage and I was not able to understand it at all. I was faced with this dilemma, and I'll now tell you how I ended up analyzing this scenario. Okay, I'll tell you what I chose, but first I will tell you how I analyzed it and came to that decision, because that analysis is more important than this case. Okay, so let me show what I did. So I was thinking of situation A. Okay, what if I actually skip some of the questions or do them half-heartedly? What does it lead me to? So think of it this way, that I have attempted 22 questions till now. I'm probably at the 23rd question. Now, it is a very tough passage. What does it mean? Can anyone tell me? I'm seeing a very tough RC passage as a 23rd question. Can I draw any inference from that? If yes, what can be the inference? I would like to hear from you guys. What do you think can I infer from seeing a hard RC passage as the 23rd question? I'll wait for a few more responses. Okay, really good guys. Shivam, Sunit, Chak, Nishchal, really good point. So see, when do you get a hard passage? You get a hard passage when you have done well. Okay, Abhishek says I am tired. That's a good way to look at it. But let's assume that I was not tired. Let's assume that, and I was actually trying to understand the questions really well. So I can definitely understand that I have done well till this point for sure. That's something I can definitely understand. Now, what does it mean? If I have done really well till this point, probably the questions that I have right now are very high value questions. Okay, so they're of very high value as compared to the other questions that I have solved till now, maybe because the difficulty level has increased. Now, if I go for option A and I start skipping some questions, okay, what is going to happen? I'm going to lose out on this high value questions. These are very high value questions and I'm going to lose out on it. So all the effort that I did till now, I solved 22 questions. I tried to get them right. I increased the difficulty level to a point where the GMAT started serving me hard questions. And now all I do is I get them wrong. Probably there can't be anyone a bigger fool than me. Basically, I have actually screwed up everything if I go for option A, and in fact, option C is even more disastrous if you are actually skipping the whole passage entirely. Okay, so what happens then? Even if I actually skip this or I skip some of the questions, I'm going to save some time for the last 10 questions. But the irony of the fact is the last 10 questions are going to be of lower value because I did not do well in these 3 or 4 questions. So the difficulty level is only going to go down. So even if I get this low value questions right, my score would have got stuck around this range, 36 to 39. So I thought it really doesn't make sense for me to follow the strategy. I should not skip it. So what I did was I went ahead with the second one. I said, no, I'm going to do this RC well. And in fact, trust me, it was a very tough situation to be in. Like, I'm not sure if you can even imagine that. If you have taken a mock, you might have been in that scenario. I had just 19 minutes left on the clock, but I kept my calm. I read the passage exactly the way I read it when I solve a RC passage in practice. I did that for the passage. I spent 5 or 6 minutes just on reading the passage. So think of this scenario. After spending those 5 or 3 minutes, I was still left with 13 minutes, only 13 minutes on the clock and 14 questions to be answered. But the good thing was I was very confident that I have understood the passage well and I could answer those 4 questions within 3 or 4 minutes. So I was left with 10 questions and 10 minutes in the end. What I did was I chose to do rest of the questions selectively. I just did 5 or 6 of them. The ones which I was more comfortable with, I did, and I skipped the rest of them. Now, what happened then? How it helped me? Basically, if I look at the scenario, I was able to get those high value questions right. What happens if you get high value questions right? GMAT serves you questions of higher difficulty level. So the last 10 questions that I got were of higher difficulty. And even if I'm getting selectively some of them right, my score is gonna be much more than the first or the third scenario. Okay. I ended up with a verbal score of 41 in my attempt. Okay, and that's something which I wanted to really actually discuss with you, because a lot of you actually, I won't say a lot of you, but a lot of students generally have this perception that they are not doing well because they are not able to complete the test. They are not doing well because they are not able to they are not having enough time for the last 10 questions. I also had just 10 minutes for the last 10 questions, but I still ended up the verbal 41 because I did really well on the first 26. So you have to build the capability. And again, mark my words, my friend, this capability is not gonna work directly on the test day. You have to build the capability to do well on the first 26 questions on the GMAT. Okay, so this is a case study which I wanted to discuss with you to help you understand how the algorithm actually, how you should work in the a tough scenario as well. Okay, Nandita has a question. Were you able to attempt all the questions once you finished the RC? Nandita, I attempted all the 4 questions of that RC passage because I have already spent 6 minutes on the passage. So I did them well. I solved them in maybe 3 or 4 extra minutes. The rest 10 questions, the last 10 questions which you see over here, I selectively did around 6 of them, if I remember correctly, 5 or 6. I don't remember the exact number, but that's what I did in the last 10. I was selective over here. Okay, so this is what I did. Now, I'm sure since a lot of you marked actually C, which is basically skip the entire passage and get it wrong, I'm sure a lot of you do not really understand how the algorithm is working. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show a very simple example. Okay, very, very simple example to help you understand how the algorithm really works. All right. So let's say that I'm looking at just 5 questions and I'm going to take two students, and on the left y-axis you can see the difficulty level of questions. So almost every student starts with a medium difficulty level. Like the first question generally is of that difficulty level. So let's say student 1 starts with a medium difficulty question. He gets it right. So what happens is the adaptive algorithm basically means if you get a question right, the algorithm is gonna serve you questions of higher difficulty level. Okay, so that's what happens. Sukhjinder and Jeff, I'm gonna take your questions. Just wait, hold on for a second. I'm just gonna complete this slide and take your questions. So what happens with the student is he gets questions. The next question he gets is of a medium hard difficulty level. Okay, let's assume that he gets that right as well. The next question that he gets is a hard question. Let's assume he gets this question right too. So obviously there's nothing much above the hard difficulty level. The algorithm keeps serving him hard questions, and he makes a mistake in this one, and he will then get a slightly easier question, maybe a medium hard question, which he gets wrong. Okay, so all in all, this student has got 3 questions correct and 2 incorrect. Now let's calculate his scores. I want you to take a second and calculate his scores. Look at the difficulty level scores that are mentioned on the y-axis and tell me what is the score of the student. Okay. I would wait for a minute. I want to hear from you guys. What is the score of the student? Look at the questions that he got right. He got a medium question right, a medium hard right, and a hard question right. What is his score according to you? Okay, beneath, good. 12 points, right? Good. So you just add 3, 4, and 5, you end up with 12 points. So his accuracy is 60%. His accuracy is 60%. He's at 12 points. Let's take another student, for example. Okay, let's take another student. He also starts with a medium question, but he gets it wrong. Then he served an easy medium question, which he gets wrong as well. He gets an easy question, then he gets that right. He's probably good at them. He gets an easy medium question, which he gets right. And finally, he gets a medium question, which he also gets right. Now, what happens in this case? Look at his score. This student scores just 6 points, but the accuracy of both these students is exactly the same. And that's what I want you to understand. A lot of students come to me and say that I'm actually getting 80% of my questions right when I'm solving OG questions. But when I take a mock test, my score is very, very low. How many of you have been through that scenario? I'll quickly ask you this question. Quick yes, no poll, guys. How many of you have been in that scenario? That when you solve OG questions or practice questions, your accuracy is really high, but in the mock test, your accuracy dips significantly. Okay. Interesting, and something which I actually see with almost every student. All right, I'll wait for a few more votes, guys. Let's see where it stabilizes. Okay, let me end it now. I have a good number of responses already. So I can see that almost more than 85% of you have been through that scenario. And the core reason behind that is a lot of people focus on accuracy and do not really understand that GMAT is not just about accuracy. It's about a lot more other things. Okay, so that's something which is that you need to understand. And this is a very simple example that I took. GMAT is not this this adaptive that it changes the difficulty level after every question. They haven't released the how the algorithm works, so we have tried to decode it from our standpoint. So what we have understood till now is that it adapts after every 3 or 4 questions. Okay, it looks at your overall accuracy in set of every 3 or 4 questions, and then it basically adapts. Okay, so I'll take a few questions which are there in the chat here. Sukhjinder was asking, I have heard that the first 10 questions are the tough ones. Sukhjinder, it's not really the case. Probably if you're doing well on the test, the most difficult ones are going to be in the third quarter. Okay, and I'm going to talk about the quarters, don't worry about it. Jeff has a question. For the last part, is it better to attempt all questions even if some are wrong? Not really, Jeff. See, if you're talking about the use case that I shared, if I have 10 minutes left and 10 questions to answer, I'm much better off by focusing on few questions and getting them right instead of focusing on everything. Okay, because I have a certain method that I use to solve questions. If I try to solve questions in less time, I'm going to have to move out of that method and use something else. With another method, I will not have the same accuracy. So I will never recommend that. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about your questions as well. If any other questions are there in your mind, please hold on to that. I have got you covered in this webinar. I'm gonna talk about a lot many things which you're asking in the polls. Okay, so let's move ahead. So this is a simple scenario that I wanted you to understand to basically get a fair idea of how the algorithm adapts. Now let us take an exact scenario from a GMAT. An official enhanced score report is what I'm going to share now. Okay, so this is the verbal section of the official score report of one of the students. Now, in this report, I'm going to help you understand how you read this report. So there are 36 questions in verbal altogether, out of which 30 questions are scored. There are 6 questions which are experimental. So GMAT doesn't really give you any score for those 6 questions. 30 questions are scored. And in the ESR, what it shows is there are 4 quarters. Think of it as 4 quarters. Okay. The first quarter has 8 questions. The second quarter has 7 questions. The third quarter has 7 scored questions. And the last quarter has 8 scored questions. Okay. So overall, there are 30 questions that are scored. And this basically ESR shows you the accuracy of the student in each of these quarters. Okay. So what does it mean? It basically means that in the first quarter, this student made 4 mistakes. He had 50% accuracy. So he made 4 mistakes. Okay. In the second quarter, this student made just 1 mistake. He had 14% accuracy. In the third quarter, he did not make any mistake. In the last quarter, he made 3 mistakes. Okay. So total mistakes made by the student was just 8. Okay. Now, before I move forward to the next slide, I would quickly ask you, is this ESR report clear to all of you? Yes, no, quickly. Quick yes, no, guys. Is this clear to all of you? I would like to see if you understood how to read this part. Quick yes, no in the poll. You don't need to type it in the chat. Just click on the poll itself. Okay. I see that it is clear to everyone. Good. So let's move forward. So remember this student now. I'm going to bring up another ESR of a different student on the right side. So left one you have already seen. Verbal score of 30, 8 mistakes, 4 mistakes in the first quarter, 1 in the second, and 3 in the last quarter. Okay. Now look at the second ESR. This student's ESR is very similar to the first student. Okay. But there is a small difference. What is the difference? This student made just 2 mistakes in the first quarter, 2 mistakes in the second quarter, and 3 in the last quarter. So overall, he made 7 mistakes. Okay. Now I want to ask you guys to estimate the score of the student. All right. I want you to estimate the verbal score of this student. So here is a poll for you. Take a moment if you want to. Estimate the verbal score of the second student. Remember, the first student scored on the left side that you see. With 8 mistakes, he scored verbal 30. I want you to estimate or guess the score of the second student. And please mention it in the poll. Don't write it in the chat. Okay. Take 15 seconds, 20 seconds or 30 seconds if required. I'm going to give you that time and tell me what could be the score of the student, second student. All right, so I see a good number of responses. Keep voting, guys. I want to see what do you think will be the score of the second student. Okay. I have a good number of responses. Let's wait for a few more. So Sukhjinder, you did not miss much. How points are awarded is basically based on the questions, the difficulty level of the questions that you get right. Okay, I'm going to talk about that in the next slide as well. Okay, don't worry about that. Okay, so I have a good number of responses. The votes have stabilized now, so I'm going to end it. Okay, so you can see the responses on your screen. Most of you think that the score is 37 or less. Like a good number of you voted for 33, 36 to 37. A good number of said it is going to be 31 to 33, very similar to the score of the first student. Some of you mentioned 34 to 35 as well. Very few of you actually voted V40 or more, and a good number of you thought that it can be as high as 38 to 39. Okay, so let me kill the suspense now and actually tell you what was the score of the student. I'm gonna just remove this question mark. Okay, so this was the score of the student. This student scored a verbal 41, and again, this is my own ESR report. So this is the exact ESR snapshot that you are seeing. Okay, verbal score of 41 with 7 mistakes. And if you look at the difference in percentiles, the first student got a 58 percentile, the second one got a 93 percentile. My percentile was 93. Okay, the difference is huge. 35 percentile is a huge difference. If you look at the verbal scores, a verbal 30 and a verbal 41, the difference between these two scores can actually create an overall difference of 60 to 70 points in your total score. So it could be the difference between 630 and 700. It could be the difference between 700 and 760. 760 is not possible for a 41. Very rare cases that happens. But 690 and a 750 can actually, it can be as different as this. Okay. So just one extra mistake can actually harm you that much. Do you think the algorithm here is very harsh? Quick yes no, guys. Do you think the algorithm is harsh here? Just one extra mistake the student did, and look at the difference in scores. Oh my god, it just kills the whole score of the student. Do you think the GMAT algorithm is harsh? Quick yes no in the poll. Okay, interesting responses. Let's wait for a few more. Okay, do you think the algorithm is harsh in the way it is evaluates you? Just one extra mistake and you're seeing that huge a difference in the scores of the two students. Okay, okay, so I see the votes have kind of stabilized. Let me end the poll now. All right, so 68% of you, majority of you, think the algorithm is harsh. Some of you think that it is not. 30% of you think that it is not. And let me tell you guys, GMAT algorithm is one of the most advanced algorithm that exists today. Okay, it is a very, it's a very good algorithm because it actually determines your ability, your skill of getting the hard questions right. Now, the key difference that you have to focus on between these two students is that the first student did 4 mistakes in the first set itself, whereas the second student made only 2 mistakes in the first set. So basically, the first student was not even able to get the medium on the easy questions right when he was served with them. And that is what costed him a lot. Okay, and I'm going to move over to the next slide where I'm going to show you the average difficulty level wise accuracies. Okay, so on the left side, you can see the accuracy chart of the first student. It's basically the same. Left is the first student, right is the second student. On the y-axis, you can see the average difficulty. On the x-axis, you see the quarters. Okay, so look at the average difficulty level. If you look at the average difficulty level in the first quarter of the first student, he actually got most of the questions in the medium to low level because he made 4 mistakes. So even the algorithm dropped the difficulty level in the first quarter as well. But the biggest bump happened in the second quarter. Since he did not have a high accuracy in the first quarter, in the second quarter, the questions that he got right, if you look at the difficulty level of those questions, was just easy to medium. It was very close to medium, but towards the easy side. Now look at the questions that the second student got right, okay, in the second quarter. Even though the accuracies look similar, but look at the difficulty level of the question that he's getting right. It was between medium to high, okay? And that is the reason, let me bring them side by side. That is the reason why the scores look that different, because the first student was only getting easy medium questions right and the second student was getting medium high questions right. He showed the capability of doing well on the hard questions. He was able to do well on the hard questions consistently, and that's why he scored a 41 and not a 30. Okay, and that is what you need to understand. A lot of people, and this is the whole reason I actually took you through this use case, because a lot of people, when they focus on their performance, they just worry about accuracy. They do not really worry about the skill. GMAT is not at all about accuracy. It's about having the skill to get questions of any difficulty level correct. Okay, it is important which questions you are getting right. If you are studying from a book and you are getting everything, you feel that you're getting 100% accuracy and you're happy about it, you need to ask yourself a question: do you really have the ability to get a question of any difficulty level correct? How confident are you when you're marking answers, when you're solving hard questions or medium hard questions? Okay, that is what is meant by skill. So if you understand the whole algorithm, I can actually summarize it in a very simple way. If you want to get a 700 plus score, you have to just do two things. First thing, you have to make the algorithm serve you hard questions. How do you do that? You have to get a high accuracy on easy and medium questions. So if you want to actually, if you want the algorithm to serve you hard questions, you need to have very close to 100% accuracy in easy and medium questions. There's very little scope for error over there. Okay, because if you don't do well on them, there's a very low chance that the algorithm will even serve you hard questions. Now, if you get served hard questions, that's only half the battle won. Okay, even the first student that I talked about probably got some hard questions, but the problem is you also need to get the hard questions right. And that's why I showed you the previous case in point where I was served with a very difficult RC passage and I took a call consciously that I'm gonna get this hard passage right, come what may. And that's where your understanding of the right skills and how to apply them come into picture. Okay, and this is something which I really want you to understand. Getting easy and medium questions right is not that tough. This is something which a lot of people can manage to do, but this is where people struggle. This is a big problem that students do not really focus on. Now, what do I mean by learning the right skills and learning how to apply them? Okay, generally what happens is, what students generally do is, when they start learning a topic, they basically learn concepts. Okay, they start with concepts. For example, let's say you are trying to learn prime numbers. You will probably start with understanding what are the basics of those prime numbers, what are the various formulas that exist. Or if you are learning verb tenses, you will probably start with learning what is the past tense, what is the future tense, simple tenses, perfect tenses. You learn all the concepts. Students do generally a very good job at this by learning the concepts. Now, the second stage of learning, ideally after learning concepts, should be mastering a methodical approach. And mind my words, I'm not using the term learning a methodical approach. I'm talking about mastering a methodical approach. You have to learn a methodology to apply those concepts in any question. And only if you are able to learn this approach and master this approach, you are going to get the hard questions right. This is very critical. And after learning the approach, then you should move to the third stage where you are supposed to solve questions on the topic. You're supposed to practice questions on the topic. These are the three stages of learning that every student should follow who is targeting a 700 plus kind of a score. Okay, and I'm not going to ask you how many of you are actually targeting a 700 plus, because I'm sure all of you will say yes. Okay, so if you're targeting a 700 plus, it is very critical that you focus on these three stages in the same sequence. But sadly, we know that a lot of people do not end up with a 700 plus score, and the biggest reason for that is they jump from step 1 to step 3 directly. Right after learning concepts, they just move into solving questions. They do not really care much about the approach that they're following. In fact, even if they care about it, they try to use shortcuts directly. They try to find shorter methods that help them solve questions under 2 minutes. But that doesn't work. If you move from stage 1 to stage 3 directly, there's a very high chance that you're going to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. It's only after learning the right skills you can actually move to stage 3. And if you do that, you will find yourself getting stuck in the 600 to 650 zone. 600 won't be a challenge. If you are really doing the concepts well, if you are focusing on the concepts well, you will find yourself in this score range easily. Okay, 550 to 600. Okay, in even some cases, some people might as well reach to a 650 level. But in order to reach that 650 mark, the application skills are very, very critical. Okay, now what do I mean by application? I've been using this term a lot. Okay, and I'm sure a lot of you might be thinking, what do I really mean by application? And let me help you understand that. So let me ask you a simple question. I'm giving you a simple mathematical equation. I want you to focus on this for a minute, and I'm going to mute myself for that much time. Solve, tell me in the chat here, how are you going to solve these two equations for x and y? Okay, I'm going to mute myself. Take your time and write in the chat, how are you going to solve for x and y? All right, so I see a good number of responses, guys. Fine, so let me go through them. Jyoti says I would substitute x is equal to 5 plus 2y in the first equation. Same says Abhijit. Anushka is gonna equate the two coefficients. Okay, Nandita is going to do the same. Giovanni is going to do the same. Arun as well. Yeah, and that's in fact the most popular approach that most students follow, right? So, and this is what we learned in school. So the easiest way to solve them is probably equating the coefficients of the any of the two variables. In this case, it is very easy to equate the coefficient of x. So you'll probably make the equations look like these, and then you are going to probably subtract the two equations, or like to eliminate x and get the value of y, and then you will end up with the value of x by substituting y in the any of the equations. So I'm sure a lot of you thought of this, and this is something which most people also do, and this is what is meant by application of concepts. So when we have to solve two linear equations, we always follow this method, and whenever we follow this method, we get to the right answer. Okay, and nothing else. This is something which was taught to us in the school. When we were learning this for the first time, I'm sure it was tough for you as well. But now, over a period of time that you have understood this really well, you apply this method on any question, you're getting answers right. And that's the same thing you have to do for every concept that you learn in GMAT, whether it is quant, whether it is verbal. The problem is, and this is a problem with most non-native speakers of the language, they do not follow a methodical approach for verbal. They do it only for quant, and people who are weak at quant also do not do this follow this methodical approach for quant as well, maybe for DS, maybe for certain topics. You're not following a methodical approach. If you're not following that, you will always end up with trouble. And let me build this point through a simple question. So what is the approach that you follow for RC today? And I'm going to talk about some of the common approaches that students actually come across, and I'm sure a lot of you would have heard this, and I want you to be very honest. I'm going to ask a simple poll like after talking about these approaches, and I want you to tell me what is the approach that you follow. So some of the let me share some of the most popular approaches. One of the most popular approaches: read the first line and the last line of every paragraph. Okay, you don't need to read the complete paragraph, and at the end of the day, it's all about saving time, right? So you read the first line and the last line, you get an idea of what is there in that paragraph, and then you jump to the questions, then come back to the paragraph if required for relevant questions. That's one approach that is prevalent. Second approach: read the passage quickly in 2 minutes, as quickly as you can, maybe 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes maximum, and treat it like a map. Okay, take a mental note of what lies where, identify what lies where, and then refer back to the passage for every single question. Okay, you can't spend a lot of time on the passage. That's the second popular approach that exists. Third approach: read the question first so you know what you are looking for, and then probably go back and read the relevant part of the passage. Okay, so tell me, which of the three approaches do you follow? And I'm going to start a poll for this, so you can just like select the right option which is applicable for you. Which of the three approaches do you follow for RC? And I want you to be very honest with me over here. All right, I have some responses in the chat, in the poll. I'll wait for a few more responses, guys. Take your time if you want to. I'm gonna give you 15 seconds more. All right, so I have got a decent number of responses already, so I'm going to end this poll now. All right, so as I was expecting, the most common and the popular approach is approach two. In fact, as a student, when I was preparing for the test for the first time, I also focused on approach two. Okay, I was actually focusing on this the most. This was the most common approach I followed. I always thought that I have to improve my reading speed. I have to read through quickly so that I am able to save time for every question. Because questions at the end of the day is what fetches you the score. It is not the passage that fetches you the score. That was my thought process. And I've struggled really. I've really struggled with verbal. I've spent a lot of time understanding what is going wrong. And that's why I'm telling from my experiences, none of these three approaches work. Okay. And I'm very happy to hear from you, Sonia and Giovanni, that you're following the right approach. And I want to talk about that as well a little bit. But before I talk about that, I want you to think of so basically what's wrong with these three approaches. The common theme in these three approaches is you have to save time. That's the idea. You have to apply a shortcut all these three approaches, basically bank on. If these three approaches do not work, they do not get you the best result. If you do not, you're not already at a very good level. Okay, so think of applying these shortcuts in the same question that we solved for quant. Let's say instead of solving it methodically, I try to randomly put x as 1. Okay, probably I got it as 1, but it does not satisfy the second time. But it does not satisfy the second time. So I'm trying to save time. So I'm probably trying to take another value. I'll try x as 2. It still doesn't work. And you keep on doing that, you will still be stuck. So if you try to use shortcuts in quant like these, it is not going to probably work for you. It is much better to solve questions using a methodical approach because it helps you to have a higher accuracy and much faster output as well. Okay, and that is why it is very important to have a and trust me guys, the right approach is it takes a lot more time than building the right concepts. So you have to do it methodically first. Involved reader. You have to follow involved and evolved reading, where you have to think like the author. You have to place yourself in the author's shoe. Try to understand the author's point of view. That's very, very critical. Okay, so I have a question from Weber. Weber is saying my voice is breaking. Let me quickly ask you guys, are you also facing this issue like Weber is? Can you hear me clearly or not? Quickly here. Okay. Okay. I think and then I am gonna ask you the same question. So let me move to another one. Just give me a second. I'm just checking my internet speed as well. Seems to be working fine now. Let me ask you again. Can you hear me now? Quickly, yes, no? I'm so sorry for asking you this question again and again. Can you hear me clearly now? Quick, yes, no, guys. Okay, this is bad. I have a couple of Wi-Fi's. This is giving me 70 Mbps. I'm not sure if it is at my end, at your end. This is happening. Okay, I can see a lot of yeses, which is good. So great, guys. So let me now move to the start on this part again. Okay, so I was saying that when you are doing this, you have to place yourself in the author's position to understand the point of view of the author. That's the best approach that one should follow. So when you are basically reading a passage, you have to break the sentences into smaller chunks as you're reading it. And you have to contextualize the meaning of individual sentences. And for subsequent sentences, you have to relate back the passage again and again. It's not like you can basically you can basically continue reading on without doing any analysis. You have to read between the lines, because 80 to 85% questions on GMAT RC are going to be inferential in nature. And these questions are going to test your understanding of reading between the lines. So you have to constantly relate back to the passage, the previous sentences, to understand where the discussion is heading. So you have to understand why the author is trying to tell you something. Take care of transition words and conjunctions. They help you in relating back the meaning a lot. And in the end, you should try and summarize each paragraph and also the passage to understand what the author is trying to say. So that's what is the right approach for solving GMAT RC questions. Again, this session is not on RC, but the whole point of talking about this is, if you do not follow a methodical approach, you cannot do well on the GMAT just because of the adaptive nature of the test. It requires you to do really well on the hard questions. That's a core skill that you need to have. Now, what is the typical learning curve of a student? Okay, generally, as I even told you, that every student basically learns concepts and then practices questions, and that's where GMAT is very, very unique. We make sure that between these two stages, we introduce the third stage, that is learning application. So what we do in our courses, every topic that is taught, whether it is sentence correction topic like modifiers, verb tenses, or critical reasoning assumptions, or quant topics like prime numbers or geometry, anything that is taught on our platform is taught in 3 stages. Firstly, we will teach you the concepts through video lessons. We will take you through the video lessons to learn the concepts properly. And then we have designed a section of our course. This is probably the most important part of our course. This is probably the most important part of our course that will make your course success. The tutors have actually did a lot of research on individual topics, identified exactly what are the various kind of questions that are tested on the GMAT from the topic, and they have created a concept booster file where you will get at least one question of each type, and where we are going to teach you how to solve the question. So we make sure we maintain consistency in the approach for solving questions throughout the course. Okay, that's something we do through concept boosters. And then when you go to practice quizzes, you are actually doing much better. You are able to test yourself in the right way. So this is a typical learning curve of a GMAT student that we follow, and this is the learning curve that you should also follow, come in whichever way you are preparing. Okay, so I hope now you guys are clear about what do I mean by application and the importance of application. Quick yes no, guys, are you clear about the importance of application? Did you understand that part already or not? Because I'm going to transition to the test taking strategy now. I'm going to talk about the test taking strategy, move to that part. So I want to make sure that all of you are clear about the application part, the importance of learning the right approach. Okay, great. So let me end the poll. I see that everyone is clear with it. So let me move to the test taking strategy. So I've talked about a lot about verbal. What about quant? Okay, and in fact, let's quickly look at what are the right approaches that we follow in our course. So for SC, the right approach is meaning based approach. For CR, it has to be pre-thinking and scope analysis. RC, I already talked about. For DS, it is important to draw inferences, and for PS, it is important to follow a 3-step process. We will keep organizing webinars on each of these, so you can always register for the webinar and attend them. We have dedicated webinars for each of these areas. So let's look at the quant part now. So I'm sharing another ESR report, basically of 2 students, and I'm gonna talk about the importance of the first 10 questions. Okay, so look at the 2 ESR reports on your screen and tell me what is the difference between the 2 ESR reports. It's very easy, but I want you to read it out before I tell you what is the difference. So look at the 2 ESRs, take your time if you want to, but tell me what is the difference between the 2 students here. I'm gonna wait for 15-20 seconds. You can post your responses in the chat here. Tell me what is the difference between the 2 ESR reports. Good. Amir, Chuck, you have identified the right thing. Good. Okay, 100% on first on for the first student. Good. Good point, Jeff. Yes. So if you look at the two students, it's very easy. If you look at them side by side, it becomes very, very easy to understand that the only difference between these two students is the accuracy in the first quarter. Okay. The first student, there are 7 questions in each quarter in quant, 7 scored questions, a total 28 scored questions. The first student made one mistake over here. Okay. This student did everything right. And you look at the score difference, a 48 versus a 50. That's an overall difference of 20 points. That can be a difference between 700 and 720 for you. Okay, that can be the difference between a scholarship versus not getting a scholarship as well. So what does this mean? It basically means the first 10 questions are in fact, first 15 questions are very critical for you. They may not be as difficult as the ones that are going to come later, but they're very critical. Okay. What about the last 15 questions? So let me now talk about 3 scenarios. Okay, I'm talking about the final GMAT scores that you get in 3 cases. And if required, take a minute if you want there to see all 3 cases. And I'm gonna derive a very important inference from these 3 ESRs. Okay. So if you look at the one common thing between all 3 students, what is the common thing between all 3 students? Tell me. Take a look at it. What is the common theme between all 3 students? Because see, this is the only way we can analyze the algorithm. ESRs are the richest source of information and data available to us. And after analyzing hundreds of them, we come up with the right test taking strategies which we suggest our students. So tell me, what is the common element? Good. Abhineet pointed out correctly. Chuck as well. Yes, the first set, and not just the first set, guys. If you look at the first and the second quarter, their accuracy is really high in the first and the second quarter. Okay. I always tell my students on GMAT Quant, you cannot afford to make any mistakes in the first 15 questions. And you saw what happened with this student. If you remember, he made one mistake with the first quarter and it costed him 2 points overall. Everything else is exactly the same. So you cannot make any mistakes in the first 15 questions. My point of view is simple. You get as high accuracy as possible in first 15, get it 100%, basically 200%. And then after that, if I divide basically the test into 2 halves, if you look at the average accuracy of the first student in the last 2 quarters, his average accuracy is around 66%. Okay, so he got 2 out of every 3 questions wrong. So his average accuracy is 66%. The average accuracy of this student is roughly 50%. Okay, and the average accuracy of the third student, if you see, is roughly 33%. Okay, and you look at the scores. Okay, even 47. What does it mean? It basically means you have to get the first 15 questions right under any circumstances. Okay, and that won't happen directly on the day of the test. You have to build the skill of making sure that you're getting easy and medium or medium hard questions right from any topic which is thrown at you. If you build that skill, and thereafter, even with a 66% accuracy, you can end up with a Q50. Okay, with a 50% accuracy, you can end up with a 49 or a 48. And with even a 33% accuracy, you can end up with a 47 on quant. All this is possible only if you get the first 15 questions right. Okay, this is very critical. So you have to focus on the first 15 questions and get them right. That's the most important thing that I tell my students for the quant section. All right, now I'm going to tell you how exactly you can actually prepare for the sharing all the data points to basically talking about the inferences, summarizing the inferences now. Okay, so let's look at the inferences that we talk. So if you're targeting 47 concentrated at this point of time, these are very important things. You you have to get the first 15 questions right. Now, what does this mean? It means that you should not try to save time in the first 15 questions. A lot of students, like what they do is, let's say they started the test and they have a simple DS question. Next one. Okay, Abhineet, I'm going to share the recording. Don't worry about that. So they try to rush to the question, move to the next one, because so Chuck and Weber and everyone else, if there is a break in voice, I really can't do anything about it. I have two Wi-Fi connections. I've tried connecting to both of them. There is an internet problem which is happening intermittently, and this is a problem because of a lot of people accessing the internet at the same time. Not in my home, but in the locality. So I'm sure that is happening with a lot of other people as well. So I'm really sorry. You'll have to bear with me on this. So I'm really sorry for this, but at least try to be with me on the slide. So I have written everything on the slide here. So try to focus on that part as well. I'm really sorry for that. So yeah, first 15 questions you have to get right. So do not try to save time there. What it means is, especially for DS questions, be very critical about like, have you thought of all the use cases that exist? If you haven't thought of all the use cases, give it extra time if required. When I was taking the test, I was making sure that I spend extra time if needed on the first 15 questions, but I get it right. That's very, very crucial. Okay. Second thing is, you need to also maintain a decent accuracy in the third quarter. So when I said you can like, even with a lower accuracy you can get a high score, it doesn't mean that you will get consecutive questions wrong. So you have to try and maintain a decent accuracy, as decent as possible. Solve questions selectively, but only in the last quarter. Try to defer the option of the case of solving questions selectively till till the end, basically as late as possible. You should do this only at the last year. You only need to focus on the first 26 questions. That's the most important. Okay, again, I don't mean the last 10 are not important, but these are the most critical ones. I generally say that even if you're left with 10 questions, 10 questions and 10 minutes, what you can always do is you can solve them selectively. So the idea is, for the first 26 questions, you should give them their due time as required. I'm not saying you should spend extra time. If it is an easy question, give its due time. If it is a medium question, give its due time to the question. If it is a hard one, obviously you will spend more than 2 minutes on it. There's a chance you might as well spend 2.5 minutes on it, on a hard question. But give every question its due time. Don't just rush to the question because you have to solve the last 10. Okay, it's very important for you to do that. And if needed, solve only 50% questions from the last 10 questions. So that's my verbal test taking strategy for you. And some common points that you need to always make sure is, you should not make consecutive mistakes. Do not, I repeat this, do not make any consecutive mistakes. Consecutive mistakes actually harm you a lot. You should never leave questions unattempted, even if you're running short on time. Mark them randomly, because if you leave them unattempted, the GMAT is going to penalize you even more. Okay. And you should make sure that you try these strategies beforehand. You should not try these strategies directly on the test day. That's not recommended at all. You should try them beforehand in a couple of mocks at least before you try it on the test day. Okay. And I know a lot of my voice was breaking in between sometimes. A lot of you may not have been able to hear me. So what I'm going to also do is, if you want to get in touch with me, if you have your ESR reports, you want me to analyze it, or you want to have a discussion with me on your question, where you can you can direct me. I've pinned it to the chat on the top. You can click on this. If you want me to analyze the ESR report of yours, you want me to discuss your right kind of algorithm part GMAT online test has changed here. So I'm seeing that all audible, which is very weird. Again, my internet speed is still decent. I don't know why this is happening. Okay, Jeff, let me be very clear. I did not say in the first example that you don't answer last questions. What I meant was you can answer questions selectively in the last quarter. In my case, I was left with 10 minutes, 10 questions. I just solved 6 of them selectively. So when you are doing that selection, try not to make consecutive mistakes. So try not to skip basically consecutive questions. So I used to skip some questions in between and do half of them right, half of them like that. I was moving. Okay. So I'm going to now move to the test taking strategy. Sorry, not the testing strategy. What has basically changed in the online GMAT? Because I know a lot of you might be thinking about how the online GMAT is happening and what are the various changes. So I'm going to talk about that, and then I'm going to open it for open-ended Q&A. So what has changed in the online GMAT? So in terms of the test format, again, this is an interim online GMAT. This is only for the period when the test centers are closed due to coronavirus situation. If a test center is open in your country, your city, you can still go and take the test. Okay, but if it is not open, this is an interim solution which is there. There is no AWS section. There is a fixed order. You have to follow IR between in the entire test. That is just before the IR section, between the verbal and the IR portion. No pen and paper is allowed. Only online whiteboard is allowed. And if you want to actually exactly same whiteboard which is used by the GMAT. Okay, so there is no pen and paper. This is the biggest flaw. Again, solving quant questions without pen and paper is going to be very challenging. So unless you have a very important reason for taking a GMAT, I don't recommend you to take the online version of the GMAT. Okay, and if you have to take the online version of the GMAT, make sure you're using the whiteboard. I've shared a link with you. You can probably start using that whiteboard right away. The scores in the online GMAT cannot be cancelled, and you can only take them once. What is the difference in terms of system setup and requirements? It is going to be a proctor test for sure. The proctor can see you. You won't be able to see the proctor. The proctor can chat with you or even call you on your phone. You're not supposed to look here and there much or try to speak to yourself when you're solving questions. So that is something which is not allowed at all. You require around 15 minutes for the initial setup. Some students have even asked to join at least 25-30 minutes before. Smooth, you will have all the clarity about how to take pictures of your workstation and all those things. It can be only taken from a laptop or a desktop with wired keyboard and mouse. You're not supposed to use a wireless keyboard or a mouse. In case the proctor checks, that is something as policy which is not allowed. And it can be booked 24 hours prior at a charge of $200. Okay, so these are the basic changes which are there. I'm opening this session now to an open-ended Q&A. You can always discuss with me, connect with me on piyush@gmatwiz.com, and there is my number also. This is my own WhatsApp number. You can connect with me over here. You can visit our website for free trial and access the personalized course. And please feel free to put your questions in the chat now. Any questions that you